Mel, great to see you, as
Good to see
always.
you. Good to see you, Stan.
Let's go back just a couple years to your senior year in college, and you went to a smaller school. And I'm wondering, did you have aspirations of playing pro football when you went to college and as you approached the end of your college years?
Well, definitely when I went to college, I did not have any aspirations. It was, you're just a young kid, glad to get a scholarship and just want to go and make the team and try to keep your grades up and all those things. But it wasn't until my junior year that I actually started thinking, you know what, I might enjoy playing football. And one of the things that happened to me is my freshman year, because I went to Southern University as a wide receiver, but they had two All-Americans, and so thank God some coach was smart enough to put me on the defensive side of the ball, and got a chance to play. And so by the time I got to my junior year, I was starting to kind of figure out that position and how to play it. And so my senior year, I definitely was thinking, well, I might get drafted. And sure enough, I got drafted in the third round, which I was disappointed because everybody think there's a first rounder, but I couldn't be happier than the way things turned out. The players that I was able to play with, the team, the Pittsburgh Steelers, it's been a great ride.
Undoubtedly, but I'm wondering on draft day, you're a Southern kid, you're in Georgia,
Right.
and you get drafted in Pittsburgh, wasn't a very good team, snow,
Yeah.
cold, and I wonder, like Joe always said, he didn't want to come. A Texas guy didn't want to come to Pittsburgh, and I wondered, did you have any similar reaction when you were drafted by
I
Pittsburgh?
think every kid that grew up in the South, wanted to stay basically in the South and didn't want to. And I can remember coming to Pittsburgh after the draft, and I'm thinking, oh my God, is this where I got to? And the weather, but and it actually took me. I didn't really start getting used to Pittsburgh and the weather until about 10 years after, and this was in 1980. I came into the Steelers in 1970. I mean, I didn't spend an off season up here. The winters were brutal as far as I was concerned, but now, as you know, I live here, and I love it. So it's been a great, transformation from a guy growing up in the South and loving the sunshine and the warm weather, but now I love the change of climates, and I just love the people here. So it's been good.
When you got here, Mel, as I mentioned, the team wasn't very good, but they had begun to draft some pieces. And I wondered, even as a rookie, if you sensed, hey, maybe there's something going on here, or did that occur a couple years after you arrived, that maybe something special was brewing here?
Well, I came here in 1970, of course. They had won one game and lost 13, but they had Joe Green. And my rookie year was his second year. And so, when we played that whole season, the last game of that season was against Philadelphia. And Joe Green somebody pissed him off, and he took the ball and threw it up in the stands. I don't know if you all remember that, but I knew right then, I said, man, with a guy like this, we got a chance to do some things. And and that was my rookie year, and so we came back the second year, and then Bradshaw, he was beginning to come into form and understand, and we had, of course, Ron Shanklin. So they were beginning to put pieces together. But to be honest, I never thought, like 70, 71, 72, that we would be accelerating that fast towards the Super Bowl. In 1974, when Swan and Starworth and that class came in, we were, but Chuck had started building the foundation, to get to where we went in 1974.
Did it take winning that Super Bowl IX against the Vikings, to prove to you that you were a Super Bowl team, or did you sense that after they added Franco and what you saw of the class in '74, that you were a legitimate Super Bowl contender?
Well, it's no question. I think of all the Super Bowls, in Super Bowl IX, when we went to New Orleans to play, I don't think there was a player on that team that thought that we was going to lose. I mean, because we just had such confidence, and we knew we had the athletes. And it was just it was a beautiful thing, because we had come out of Oakland with that victory, which everybody thought we was going to lose. And so it was something that I think, to a man, that we expected. We expected to win, and then we expected to win the next year. And the years that we didn't win, we expected to win, and we were very disappointed that we didn't.
When you got toward the latter two Super Bowls, and I've asked some of the other guys this, Super Bowl 14, number 4 for the Steelers, did it occur to you that I've been here for a decade, and we won 3, and now we're going to try to win a 4th against the Rams? Did you have any sense that at some point, because you all basically came in together and you won together, but you are now growing older together, that this might be the last opportunity?
No, I never thought that. I don't know what the other guys, but I think when we went to the Rams and won that Super Bowl, you know, we had some of our former coaches on that staff.
Bud Carson.
Yeah, and I think also Lionel Taylor. But here's the thing, we went out there, and I think after winning that Super Bowl, we thought that there were several more Super Bowls in us, because we beat the Rams, and we beat them with some of our former personnel. And I think, and I noticed that we thought that we were going to go back, you know, because winning is contagious, and you just think that once you do it, you know what it takes, and you're going to get it done. And so I never thought that would be our last Super Bowl.
This is a fun thing for Steeler fans to debate. It's a great discussion, and there's no wrong answer, or right answer for that matter. But they like to pick, of the 4 Super Bowl teams, which was the best. I happen to think it was '78, because that's when the offense blossomed, and that with Bradshaw and Swan, Starth, and Jim Smith. I don't want to forget him, you know, what a great receiver he was. But there are a lot of people, including Dan Rooney, rest his soul, that thought actually it was '76 when you put together the greatest stretch of defense ever played.
And we didn't get there.
And you didn't get there because the injuries to Rocky and Franco.
Right.
But 9 games, 4 shutouts, 28 points. Take us back to 1976. You start out 1-4. Bradshaw's hurt in Cleveland.
Right.
Mike Kruzak has to come in. You turn to Rocky and Franco. But what was the defense's mentality? Hey, it's up to us now?
Well, you know, that to me, that was the best team that I played on in Pittsburgh, and I played 14 years in Pittsburgh. So the best team that we had never got to the Super Bowl, in my opinion. But to go back during that season, we won the first game, and then we lost 4 in a row. And I think the defense, I think we really came into our own during that time, because what happened was we knew that we had to play. We had to play at a high level because our quarterback was out, and we knew we was only going to get so much from the offense. But I think that year, our confidence level went to an all-time high. And you know, when you start playing with confidence, and when you have athletes like we had, it's very easy to do what we did. I mean, we shut some people out, and we went on a run that was historical, you know. And so that was the best team, in my opinion, that Chuck Noll put together. And it's so unfortunate that we got the running backs hurt against Baltimore, and you know, we just we couldn't overcome that.
People may not realize this, but in that AFC Championship game, out of necessity, Chuck and the offensive staff actually invented double tight end.
Exactly.
Because you were down to Reggie Harrison as the only running back you had, and
Yeah.
now you see double tight ends all the time. But that they like they say, necessity is the mother of invention.
Well, that's true, and one of the things I think that Chuck don't get, when they start talking about great coaches, he's not, they talk about the Belichicks, the Schulers, and the Landrys, but Chuck was ahead of his time. I mean, you're right. We came out with a two tight end formation, and it hadn't been seen. In fact, it was so advanced until a lot of the players wasn't sure what they were supposed to be doing. But Chuck, he knew that he was shorthanded in the running back position, and and we had Rebby, I call him Booby, Reggie Harrison, and so he tried to get the most out of what he had.
What was as a player, what was it like playing for Chuck?
Well, I think that the one thing that I can say about playing for Chuck is that you always knew where he stood. And Chuck was the kind of guy that, he expect a performance at a high level. And it was nothing personal. That's just the way, he came from that Paul Brown school of football. It's about execution and it's about discipline. And, so I think it was great because I think with the talent that we had and the youth, I mean, we all were young players. We needed somebody like Chuck to, to make sure that we stayed in line because he ran that kind of ship. And I think it was good, and I think that's one of the reasons, along with many other reasons, why we won, because everybody knew that you had to be disciplined, and there wasn't a whole bunch of nonsense. It was a workman type, business type attitude that Chuck projected, and he wanted, and we had to buy into it.
Some people have described Chuck as aloof. I'm wondering what kind of a personal relationship you may or may not have had with him. Did he do that because he felt he had to distance his players? And even if that's the case, did you ever feel as though that he didn't care about you as an individual? A lot of players told me he cared a lot about his players.
Yeah, no, I can tell you this. I don't know of any player that I can say had a personal relationship with Chuck. I think Chuck, like you said, I think he loved and respected his players. But I think Chuck, like I said, coming out of the Paul Brown school, that he kept everybody at arm's length. But I've never seen, I never heard of anybody saying that Chuck mistreated them. He maybe didn't treat everybody the same, but he treated everybody fairly. And that's all you can ask.
As you think about your life after football, and I've had players tell me this, that sometimes things that Chuck talked about in football but in life resonated with them in decisions they made in their life after football. Did you find that to be the case?
I can't think of a day go by that it's not something that I've learned or heard from Chuck that I don't use in my everyday life, whether it's personal life or whether it's in business. And things like Chuck used to always say, you never arrive. What does that mean? It means that you can't sit around and think that you've made it. You got to keep hustling. I mean, and so it's just things like that. I think Chuck was a great teacher, and he had a way of teaching you, and all you had to do was listen, and then he had a way of looking at you, and then you knew what that meant. So
that went to media guys too, by the way, I can tell you.
Yeah. So I think we're, as men, I think we're very fortunate to have had somebody like that in our lives that help us to be who we are and to get to the places that we've gotten in life.
Let's go back to your early playing days. You're a kid out of a small college, as you mentioned. You didn't start out as a defensive back. Did you have doubts that you could play at this level? And the second part, Mel, is had you always been that physical a corner, or is it something that you learned and developed in how to succeed and excel in the NFL?
Well, you know what? let me just say that when I came to the Steelers, and when the Steelers drafted me, you know, I just thought, I said, man, this is, you know, what an easy life this is. Because when we played football in the SWAC, in all black colleges, you know, it was physical, you know, when you got off the bus, you know. And so I didn't find the pro level, I didn't find it to be that challenging. And, you know, I was always physical, and I tell people that, you know, I'm the youngest of 11 kids. There were 7 boys and 4 girls, and we all grew up on a farm, and it was work every day, you know, because my parents, they farmed, and you had to work the fields. You had to, you know, if you was in the tobacco field or cotton field, you went to work. So physicality was just a part of, that's what made me who I am. And you know, we used to get out there and run those 350s. That was easy, you know, because I was always used to working in the sun and doing physical work. And then I trained, you know, I learned how to train, I mean, working out, lifting weights and running. And so I thought it was a good way to make a living. And, you know, I was fortunate enough to have the ability and then play with great players. That always helped.
Was there one assistant coach that you can cite that was perhaps most responsible for teaching you the technique? Obviously, you had the physical ability, but you had to learn technique.
Well, you know, when I came to the Steelers, I didn't know anything about, I wasn't a football guy. I was just a talent. I was an athlete that somebody saw something in. And when I was in college, we played man-to-man. That's why I was a great, in my opinion, bump and run guy, because that's what we did. You know, we played man-to-man, and so when I came to the Steelers, I had to learn how to play zone, you know, and because it's a whole different mindset, and you have to have discipline where you got to stay in your zone versus running out of it, chasing a receiver. So I had to learn all that. And Charlie Sumner, who was a defensive back coach when I got here, he started to teach me that. And then after Charlie, you know, we had Bud Carson, and I think I really learned more football from a defensive perspective under Bud Carson, because he was a great defensive mind. Hard to get along with, but he was a great defensive mind. And then after that, Woody Woodenhofer. So I was always being tutored or coached by great football minds.
It's been more than 40 years since the NFL changed the rules. And I wonder if you take any pride, and they've changed the rules significantly to favor offense.
Yeah.
But the biggest one initially was called the Mel Blount Rule. And I wonder if you look back at that and take pride that you, in effect, singularly, forced the NFL to change the rules so that they can open up the offense a little bit.
Well, let me give you a story about that. Now, when that happened, Chuck flew all the defensive backs, because I lived in the South and guys lived all over the place. He flew us all in, and he was talking about the rule and how we had to change the way we play. And he had this glide and slide, this shuffle concept that he thought we should play. And he said, Mel, he said, they changed the rule because of you. And you know, and I felt at that time, you know, it was like an insult. I'm like, well, what did I do to make them change? But now my kids and my grandkids, they love it, and so I'm fine with it. But when it first happened, it was really hard for me to accept.
You know, it's funny. People who weren't even born back then are well aware of your legacy in that regard. And I wonder if you have younger people who never saw you play. They come up to you and recognize that fact.
They do. It's amazing. I mean, you travel around the country and, you know, people meet you and they say, oh, man, yeah, you're the reason they changed the rules. And then you go to some of these camps and the young defensive backs. And I said, man, that's why it's so hard for us to play it because of you, you know. So it's been a beautiful thing. And, you know, football's a team sport. I mean, they named the rule after me, but you know, you had guys like Joe Green and Ernie Holmes and all the guys that was on that defense making us all better. And that's the great thing about football. It's such a team sport that, you know, you can have a guy on the other side of the defense. You know, if you're on the right side, you got somebody like LC coming off the ball, rushing the quarterback, making him get rid of the ball. So it all comes together when you work together and really have a single mission, and that's the win.
I want to talk about that defense in particular. You mentioned 76, so many Hall of Famers and players who should be in the Hall of Fame,
Yeah.
And might have been had it not been for so many gigantic football personalities, you included, Joe, of course. When you mentioned 76, and you were playing with a lot of confidence. I remember Joe saying to me one time, he said, when teams would come into Three Rivers during those years,
Yeah.
they were beat before the kickoff. And
Before they got off the bus, they knew they were beat. I mean,
it's not physically. They weren't afraid physically,
Yeah.
but they knew they were in for a really tough day. And
Yeah.
I wonder if you felt the same, if you could see that, feel that. And I use the word fear.
Oh yeah, well, I think that's one of the things, you know, when I was talking about confidence earlier. You know, we were a confident group of guys, and the reason we were confident because we knew we were good. We knew we had talent, and we knew we were prepared. I mean, we had some great coaches, man. Chuck and Woody and Lionel Taylor, all those guys, George Perlis.
Perlis.
Those guys were great. They were great coaches, and so there was no reason for us to feel any other way but confident and knowing that when the team got off that, they knew when they came into Three Rivers that it was going to be a long day. And and when they opened up the offense in 1978, I think it just took Bradshaw and Swan and all those guys to a new level, you know. And we had Randy Grossman, then we get Benny Cunningham. I mean, we had talent on both sides of the ball. It wasn't just we had great defense. We had a great offense too, and we had a great offensive line, which it all starts up there. And then our special teams were great because I played special team for 14 years. So you had a lot of your people who were out there on the football field on defense or offense. You had them on special teams. So it must have been a fun thing for those coaches to coach us.
It was a fun thing for the fans. And go back when you won the playoff game in 72, only to lose to Miami, the Immaculate Reception. And then the Super Bowl champ, first trip to the playoffs in 40 years. And I wonder, as a player, even from the South and so many players from different areas of the country, if you felt this community's hunger to win. After all that time, and it's a football town, they're very passionate about it. I wonder if you, the team, the players, got caught up in the emotion of Western Pennsylvania.
Well, I can tell you this, that we were reminded, even as a rookie, you know, the 1 win and 13 losses, and we were reminded that, you know, Pittsburgh, I mean, the Steelers, their reputation, not just their record, but their reputation wasn't that good in the city. You know, they used to talk about guys going to the bar and drinking, and I mean, and so it was a whole different mindset when Chuck came along and the kind of players he wanted. And so I think we got caught up in the knowing that we could build something special here. And we knew that that's what Chuck was about. And so I think when we lost that game to Miami in 1972, you know, it hurt. It really hurt. And sometimes you have to have that kind of experience to get you to where you want to be. And so the next year we come back and we lose to Oakland in the playoffs. And so, and after that, we get the draft that I think is probably one of the most amazing drafts in the history of the NFL. And we get Webster and Lambert and Stallworth, and I think that's 4 Hall of Famers. Well, you got Webster's a Hall of Famer, Lambert's a Hall of Famer, Swan, Stallworth. So you get 4 Hall of Famers out of that draft. That's pretty neat, and it kind of put us in a position that we could make a run at it, and we did.
So many players mentioned to me who were on that first team in 1974. They remember a lot of things about it, but the snapshot, iconic moment was the picture of the Chief taking the trophy, the Lombardi Trophy from Pete Rozelle.
Yeah.
I mean, there are pictures of it all over.
Yeah.
And every time I see it, I can't help but smile.
Oh, yeah. Well, I don't know what he could have felt, but I can only imagine that it was just a surreal moment for him because he had never experienced that. And, you know, to all of a sudden get there, it had to be pretty special.
What a wonderful man.
Yeah.
Do you have the occasion to stay in contact with most of your teammates from those years?
Yeah, we stay in touch. I mean, I stay in touch with guys who I know how to get in touch with. You know, the Lamberts and the Hams and the Joe Greens and people like that, Stallworth, Shells. But I saw some guys, man, last night, like the running back Anthony Anderson. I'm like, who is this guy? You know, because I saw the list of players that was coming for this reunion, and you know, of course, you know Larry Anderson because he was a big part of that win out there in Los Angeles running those kickoff backs, and then Zach Valentine. I mean, guys who you just, I mean, hadn't seen them since they left. You know, and it was pretty special. It was pretty special because it's something when you go through training camp and you go through the sweat and the blood and the tears of training camp and a long season. There's a bond there, whether you spend a lot of time around that guy or not. You know, there's something you have in common. And Lauren Tays, I mean, guys who you just hadn't seen in a long time, and Fike didn't recognize. I didn't recognize Lauren, and it was the same with Woody Woodenhofer. I mean, you know, Woody always had the black silky hair, and now it's white, and you know he's thinner, and like, who is that guy there? And so it's pretty special. Guys coming back together, and you're seeing guys you hadn't seen for a long time. It's really special. Well,
my best guess is that no one had any problems recognizing you.
No.
You're an iconic figure, and amongst others. Represent the grand tradition of the Steelers and are as representative of those years as any player. It's always great to talk to you, Mel.
Well, thanks. It's good to talk to you.